Hi, I'm Jeff Ellingham. I'm the chair of the Agile Business Consortium, and I'm recording this in New York, so I'm a temporary refugee from Brexit Britain. And I'm here to talk about something rare and beautiful, a great British government success story. The tale I want to talk about is how the UK went from being a laggard in the field of e-government to being the world's number one. It's a story that has strategic leadership at its heart, an agile culture, and a razor-sharp focus on user experience. So a little bit about me. I've been involved in technology and education for 30 years, and the last decade I've been running an IT department in local government in the UK. And digital transformation, digital government has been what that's been all about. So I'm really passionate about how we harness technology for public services. And I think that the digital transformation of government around the world is one of the biggest challenges and opportunities for scaled agile in the world today. I thought I'd start with this picture. So what does this picture say to you? What kind of organization does this look like? You can see post-it notes and things over on the walls at the back. There's lots of stuff that shows collaboration going on. There's an interesting little sticker down here in the corner that says, ask people what they do, not what they want. So it looks like a pretty agile kind of place. Agile is more than just post-its, but it feels like something modern. This is the Department of Work and Pensions, just down the road from me in Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. This is right at the heart of government. And I show this picture because to me, this doesn't look like what I think of when I think of government. And the whole of this story is about things that don't look like government and the impact of not doing things the way that government has always done has on things. So here's the survey, here's the table that I talked about right at the start with the UK at the top of the United Nations e-government survey from 2016. And it's great to see us at the top, but if you look at the little graph by the side where for some strange reason up is bad and down is good, you'll see that we haven't been number one for a long time. In fact, if you go back to about 2009, 2010, we were one of the worst performers. So when we're telling the story, we have to think about what was it that was happening around 2010 that changed things up? And what was it that happened since then that's allowed that momentum to continue? So there are some clues that we can look at when we look back. We'll start with this one. David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of Britain. I believe that the creation of government digital services is one of the great unsung triumphs of the last Parliament. So this has got something to do with politics, it's got something to do with government, and it's got something to do with this government digital services thing, what we in the UK call GDS for short. But that's only part of the story. There's another really important piece of context, and it comes out of this note. Dear Chief Secretary, I'm afraid there's no money. Best wishes and good luck, Liam. Those of you in the UK will recognise this and know that this was a real thing. This was a real handwritten note left in the Treasury Department at the change of government in 2010. Because in 2010, the change of government was based on something that happened just before. And the third context is all about money. So in 2008, we have this maelstrom of stuff going on in the financial markets, starting just down the road in Fifth Avenue at Lehman Brothers and rippling out around the world. And the UK wasn't affected as badly as some countries like Greece, for example, but it was affected pretty badly and partly led to the collapse of the Gordon Brown Labour government at the election in May 2010. So from May 2010, we start counting. This letter you'll see is the incoming government coming in and finding a letter saying there's no money left. Now we'll put aside for a minute the political foolishness of writing a letter that's going to be waved around in press conferences for years afterwards, which of course it was. But just think about what that means in government. You're coming in, you want to do things, and finances are really, really depleted. And one of the things that the Cameron government looked to save money was digital government. They knew from seeing the likes of Amazon and people kind of building up stuff in the private sector that it was possible to be efficient and effective in digital services. But when we looked around at digital government in the UK in those days, as you saw from that graph earlier, things weren't so great. There were hundreds of little websites. Each department had its own website. If you wanted to get something done, you'd need to know which department serviced that particular need. What was the service called inside that department? What form did you need? And you probably needed to download the form and print it out. So things were pretty poor. And the government made a really, really good decision. They knew they needed someone to advise them, and they picked someone called Martha Lane Fox. Now, Martha Lane Fox had been a really successful digital entrepreneur in the dot-com era. She founded lastminute.com, she went on to join the board of Twitter and so on, and in 2009, just before our story starts, she was made the UK's digital champion. She was given the job of getting the UK online, of setting up learning centres in coffee shops and schools, educating parents and anybody who wasn't online and trying to get things moving. They called it Race Online 2010, and that was her mission. And then she was called into the government in 2010 in September time and asked, would she take on this really important job of looking at all of the British public services on the internet and working out how to make them work better and more efficiently. And she took the job on and she went off and she wrote a report. And she wrote that report in about 4 weeks. And in her report, pretty skinny report, but very strategic, there were just 4 recommendations. So recommendation number 1, create a single website for government. That sounds really obvious, but it was pretty revolutionary at the time. If you think about something like Amazon as a good model for this, if I want to buy something from Amazon, I don't need to know who makes the thing. I don't need to know who sells it. I don't need to know how they get it into the country. I don't need to know what the logistics are for delivering it to me. All I need to do is go to Amazon, type in the thing that I want, buy it, and it will appear at my door the next day. Now that was revolutionary in logistics and private sector enterprise. Martha Lane Fox's vision was to do the same thing in government. I shouldn't need to know which department does the thing that I want them to do for me. I shouldn't need to know what they call it. I shouldn't need to know what their internal processes are. All I should need to do is go to a single website, which ends up being called gov.uk, and say, I want this, and they should be able to do it for me. So that's the vision. Number 2, open up data to third parties through APIs. Back in these days, governments were spending a lot of time trying to create publicly facing websites that would give people information. A really good example of this is Transport for London. So Transport for London is the body that's responsible for the red buses and the tube trains. And back in these days, they were spending a huge amount of effort and time and money in trying to create journey planners because everyone was doing journey planners. So if I want to get from one part of London to another, how do I change trains? Which trains do I get? Do I go on a bus? So they put all this money in, but it's really expensive, not just to build a service like that, but to maintain it. And at some point, somebody realized, and Martha Lane Fox captured it here, that if you make that data public, so if you share what your timetables are and where the trains run, and ideally the real-time information about where the buses and the trains are at any one time, somebody like Google Maps will come along and gobble that data up and then spit it back out again to consumers in the way that they want it. And not only will that cost you almost nothing, because all you have to do is provide the data, but it integrates. So it's great if I want to get from North London to South London, I can use the Transport for London Journey Planner. But if I want to get from Edinburgh to Dover, going through London, I don't want to have to go to different websites. I want to go to Google Maps, put in Dover and have it take me all the way down the train system, change onto the London Underground, get a bus, come out the other end, get on a train, get down to Dover. So that's what that's all about. It reduces cost, but it actually means that better services end up in the hands of citizens. So number 3 is giving absolute control to a central team to look after user experience. Now that doesn't sound very agile to a lot of people because a lot of people have the idea that agile is not about control. Agile is just about getting on with stuff and doing some stuff and putting some post-its on the wall and delivering some stuff. And the problem is that as you scale that up, if you're talking about a government, you need clear direction. And agile is really about a dynamic tension between, on the one hand, clarity of direction and strategy, and on the other hand, empowering people who are closest to the information to deliver on that strategy. So this is about the direction. Give clear direction about the user experience, because if you do that, then the person who's going around this one website, which of course is really going to be provided by lots and lots of different departments, is going to be able to feel as if they're moving through a single place, that whichever bit of the website they go to, it'll behave in the same way. and finally appoint a new CEO for digital to direct all online spending. Now that's again, doesn't sound very agile up front, but this is the reality of government. If you allow anyone to spend on online, those hundreds of websites are going to start trickling up again as departments decide, oh, I need this and I haven't got time to go through the central process. So giving the center control over the spend means you get to maintain that focus on user experience. And her report said, start hiring now. And they did start hiring now. So again, the timetable clicks on. October, Martha Lane Fox writes her report. November, the Cabinet Secretary, Frances Maude, replies and said, yeah, go, let's get on with it. By February the next year, so only 3 months later, they have a team in Hercules House in London of bright young things brought in from the private sector who are starting to build a prototype. And they're given just 10 weeks to create a prototype for a new website for government. 10 weeks. And 10 weeks and 1 day later, they deliver their prototype. So now we're not even a year on from the election. Usually a report takes a year to write in government. In this particular case, in a year, we've managed to come in, diagnose the problem, work out what the strategic solution is, get a team up and running and deliver the first real product. As I say before, none of this looks like government. And actually, when you look at that team, it doesn't look like government either. It's a team of, as I said, bright young things from the private sector, but it has really clear direction and leadership. It's a group of people who are self-organizing. They're a cross-functional, multi-skilled team working together on pizza and beer to deliver something at high speed. What it looks like to me is a tech startup. There's a picture from there's a guy called Richard Pope, who was a product manager in the early days of GDS, which is what this thing was called, Government Digital Services. And this is a picture of what they thought as a team, the gov.uk website might look like. So as I say, this looks like a tech startup. Interestingly, when you look at that picture, the gov.uk actual website has gone through quite a lot of iterations since then, but it looks remarkably today like that picture that Richard Pope drew on that flip chart all the way back in 2010. So as I say, it doesn't look like government, it looks like a startup. And so producing a prototype in 10 weeks is pretty impressive, but that's what tech startups do. So that's not so impressive. The fact that government gave a tech startup the job or created a little incubated tech startup, that's quite impressive. But what's really, really impressive is not just that chapter of the story, but the next chapter. Because having created a little tech startup with a prototype of this new single website for government, what we have to do now is scale it. And this is an enormous scaling challenge because we're talking about taking a tiny little thing and rolling it out over one of the world's biggest public sector bureaucracies. And so the real surprise, the thing that's so amazing, is the little agile baby didn't get gobbled up by the big bureaucratic dinosaur of government. And I think it's worth us just spending a little bit of time thinking about how and why that happened. And I think it's down to a couple of things. First of all, if you go back to the Agile Manifesto, we talk about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And GDS took that to heart. So they didn't, when they set out to roll this out, tell people, you have to use these tools, you have to use this process, you have to use this version of Agile. What they did was focus on principles and people. The principles are fantastic. Everything here is usable, and I would recommend that you use these principles. So these are the government's design principles. Start with user needs. Curiously, if you look at the agile methods that are out there, most of them don't start with user needs. Most of them start with business need. But government was really clear. This is about citizen over government. If there's a conflict between the needs of the citizen and the needs of government, all other things being equal, if it's practical, the needs of the citizen comes first. So this is about user research. Do you remember that post-it note, that little card that we saw on the picture in the DWP? It said, ask people what they do, not what they want. The traditional way of understanding user needs is to do focus groups or to do surveys. But what you're asking people to tell you then is, what do you want? And that gets filtered through all kinds of psychology and expectation. What you really need to do is go and be with somebody in the place that they need the thing that they need and see what they do. How do they go about getting that need met now? What kind of challenges and blockers do they find? So we move from kind of traditional surveys to user research, to going out and spending time with people. Do less. So that means being modular. It's that stuff around the APIs and getting other people to do things where you can. It's about reusing patterns and reusing code. It's about a little bit more than that too. On the back of the Agile Manifesto, for those of you who know it well, it has 12 principles. I have a favorite. My favorite principle is principle number 10. Principle number 10 goes like this: simplicity, the art of maximizing the work not done, is essential. I'll just repeat that. The art of maximizing the work not done. If you're thinking about agile transformation and you're looking for the first big gain, where's the first big saving? It's there. It's the projects you don't start, the features you choose not to deliver, the little bits of things that as you evolve, you recognize don't bring value with them. The work not done is where the savings come from. Next, design with data. Don't fall into the trap that so many people do of building something and leaving the analytics and the reporting to the end thinking they're an add-on. Because if you're trying to adopt agile practices, especially the kind of thing that's talked about in lean startup, strategic experiment and quick failure and pivoting, you have to have the data back from your services to tell you, what are people doing? How are people using it? Is it doing the things that you expected? Are you getting the results that you expected? So data needs to be built in and always on. Do the hard work to make it simple. It's easy to build websites. It's hard to build them so they're easy to use. So that means using user experience people, really focusing on the user experience, that razor sharp focus I talked about earlier. Iterate, then iterate again. This is the agile bit. And this is almost all it says about agile. It doesn't go into lots of processes. It leaves teams to work that out for themselves. But it is really clear that you need to build iteratively. And in fact, if you go into the text, you'll find the terminology they use is iterate wildly. I think that's fantastic. Who would expect to see that in government? Iterate wildly. This is for everyone. It's really important in public services to remember that the people that need the services most are often the people who find it hardest to access them. So we have to make sure that we're building this in a way that's accessible, that we're using simple words, and that we're using the kind of models that people might be familiar with from something like Facebook, so that things are where people expect them to be. Understand context. People are not going to access government websites sitting at a desk at home on a desktop computer. You need to understand where they're going to be and what they're going to be doing and what kind of challenges come with that. So we're back to user research again. Build digital services, not websites. This is where collaboration comes in. So if you go into that DWP office that I showed you before, one of the things that's remarkable about it is the technology people are not sitting in one place and the operations people in another. It's one big team. Because when you're building a service, it's end to end. You need to be thinking about how I use technology along the way, not here's a website and now it's going to go over to operations. So you need to integrate your team, integrate your thinking, think about value streams. Don't think about websites. Be consistent, not uniform. So I talked earlier about the user experience being consistent, but that doesn't mean that when you're building the stuff in team levels, you need to do everything the same way. So you do what's best for the service, you just make sure that the user experience stays consistent. And finally, make things open because it makes things better. And open is a huge thing. I like to use the term radical transparency. Be transparent about your successes, but be open about your failures. Share everything. All of this stuff from GDS is available on the internet. Go to gov.uk service manual now, Google it, read that stuff, use it in your businesses because it's 10 years of accumulated understanding of how to deliver really great public services. And we're not just talking about these design principles. Okay, so that's at the team level. I get that. In government, you can do stuff at team level. You can't change things further up. Let's talk about governance, because Governance in government is difficult. Changing governance is difficult. Government is full of hierarchy. It's stuck. It's like wading through treacle. So GDS has come up with governance principles that are in use today and try to change the way that that works. So number one, don't slow down delivery. Your job as a leader, and people have to be taught this anew because it's different. Your job as a leader is to serve. It's to look for impediments, the things that are in the way of your team, and scoot them out of the way of your team so that your team can get on with their work. And then your job is to get out of the way and let your team get on and do what they do. And how do you deal with those hierarchical stovepipes? How do you stop decisions getting pushed up the tree and then coming back down again? You do it by making decisions when they're needed at the right level. And what that means is giving your teams bounded empowerment. So making sure that within a time frame or within a set of constraints, they're empowered to make whatever decisions they need to make as they're going along. They have access to the people that they need to make those decisions. If you have a decision that has to be made at a higher level, you need to get them to come to you, and they need to come now, because delivery and flow is everything. Do it with the right people. So hire the right people and trust them to get on with the job. Don't get in their way. Don't give them menus and instruction manuals about what to do. Make sure you have the right people. Go see for yourself. This is transformational. In Agile, we talk about transparency a lot. We have these boards. We use Kanban boards. We use things that enable us to show what we're doing all the time. So we don't want to be asked by senior managers to go along with a PowerPoint slide to a room and present and talk about what we've been doing. We want people to come to us. And it's not just to come and see what's on the walls and see where we're at. That's great. It's to share what we're doing. We say, show, don't tell. So don't tell me about the service that you're building. Show me what it's doing. Show me a prototype. Let me see it in reality. So we're getting leaders to come and see for themselves. Only do it if it adds value. What do we mean by that? Well, first of all, the team itself needs to know what value looks like. So the team needs to be told not just build this thing, but why are you building this thing? What's your goal? What is it we're trying to achieve? Because if the team understands what it needs to achieve, it's able to make those decisions. It's able to say to itself, okay, we're doing this stuff and it's not helping us towards this goal, so let's just stop. I know I was told to do it, but it's not working. We're going to stop. This other thing that we're doing, this is generating value we hadn't spotted. We've come up with, in our user research, some ideas for doing this in a new way, and it's paying dividends, so let's do more of it. And finally, and I guess summing all of this up, trust and verify. There's a quote that I think is from Warren Buffett that says, the key to getting things done is to hire trustworthy people and then trust them a lot. I think that's a great quote. That's what we need to be doing. Trust, and then verify means have whatever processes you need after the fact to check that people are doing the things that they're not, and course correct if you need to. But without trust, you don't have speed and you don't have flow. Thank you so much.